welcome to the 4Corners podcast. We have a full house this week as Matt is back from vacation. And so
I have a. You can't quite see it. But I have a lovely golden tan,
and
like the great Larry Zabisco.
yes, all that golf that Larry did. And then we also have Shad in the house and Craig Bott.
Diggum Craig Bott.
We were
Necessary evil.
having a very heated McDonald's discussion before the show, and I actually wanted to say, Matt, just to finish that conversation on air. McDonald's has been on the record lately saying they are pretty much abandoning their core customer base for like a higher income bracket.
That's gonna go well for him.
Okay, I don't know what higher income people are going to McDonald's. I mean, I guess my wife and I.
Warren Buffett gets breakfast there every.
More disposable income.
Warren Buffett gets breakfast there every day.
I will maintain that the bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit is, in my opinion, from McDonald's, is, in my opinion, the finest fast food item on the planet. I'll defend that. I think it's an absolutely perfect fast food sandwich. It's delicious and tasty. But I I get coffee at McDonald's. The coffee's good.
Coffee's always been good there. In the before times when they actually did the breakfast all day thing, I was very happy with that because I liked that more. But then they were like, "No, we can't do that because COVID or something." It's like, "Oh, okay, I got you."
Wendy's isn't much better. I mean, you can get a burger at Five Guys for what you can get at Wendy's now.
I chucked Wendy's out the window whenever their moron CEO said in public calls, he's like, "We're going to implement surge pricing." And then they tried to cover it up the next day. No, that's not what we meant. It's like, no, you said what you meant. You said the quiet part out loud.
I mean,
and I just haven't been back.
I mean, I still go there, but the one that has lost me pretty good is Chipotle because they are so stingy with the food now. It's like if you get a bowl, they don't even like cover the bottom of the bowl anymore.
But Brad, you can have all the E. coli you ever want.
No, you don't. No, you don't get E. coli there.
Shad.
Shad. You get norovirus, not E. coli.
You joke. Both of you joke. My wife went to this. My wife and I have not ate Chipotle for probably at least 5 years, maybe longer. And it's because the last time she went, she didn't get norovirus. I've had norovirus twice because I have kids in a daycare. And if you've never had norovirus or haven't had it recently, it is the absolute worst. It's the absolute worst. You feel like
do not recommend unsubscribe.
You feel like death for at least a day or two. And you also, everything's coming out everywhere. Both ends. But anyway, my wife she went and she got Chipotle. This is like when we lived physically in DC in the actual city, and our apartment was actually above a Chipotle. She went down and got like dinner, and she's like, "Yeah, I knew I should have known better," because like the workers were like, like.
Well, funny you mentioned that.
You want rice on that? Like that they did that, and then she got sick. She got like deathly ill for like a couple of days afterwards.
No, they
and then that was it. At that point, we're like, no, it's not worth it.
That was an issue because they were pressuring sick employees to come in. That was kind of their last round of, like, their last mea culpa was, oh, well, we'll stop letting sick people serve you food. Was their last bout.
You stop haranguing sick people to come to work when they're sick and working with food.
Yeah, so that was the last. They've really had a problem with that because that happened after the norovirus thing. So they've had like at least 2 scandals with
Doesn't surprise me.
With food. Because one of the places I remember Chi-Chi's got torched because of, I think, a green pepper contamination in like the 2000s.
Something like that.
That put them out for good.
Does Chi-Chi's even exist? Like,
nope.
Nope.
Not anymore.
That's a blast from the past.
There was like a green pepper problem, like where it got contaminated, and that put them under for good. So,
you don't actually hear about Chili's either. Like,
no, Chili's still around. No, Chili's actually has a great deal right now if you have one. So it's $10.99. You get like a limited selection of an app, a drink, and a burger for $10.99.
I was
That's actually a
watching.
pretty good deal.
I was being nostalgic and watching Brody Lee clips last night, and the way he comes in with the TNT title, he's like, "Yeah, we did," and you pan over, and there's John Silver and Alex Reynolds goes, "Boss, we got Chili's." Happy memory. I don't have much in the way of happy memories of Chili's because I've never gone into a Chili's and had a good experience.
The one by my house is pretty decent. But before that, no. Okay, so tonight we're talking about underrated wrestlers of the 80s and 90s. So there's some criteria that we kind of, I think, unofficially agreed on. But the idea is like, so this could be like people that were kind of washed by the time there's a lot of footage of them, or like people our age started watching. There just wasn't a lot of footage of them, or, you know, suddenly there's a lot of stuff out there of them, or just people have explored more. So Frank is in the chat, and he brought up Brad Armstrong, who we actually discussed. Frank, we discussed Brad Armstrong.
We did a whole episode on Brad Armstrong.
Yeah,
and,
so
that
he's
is a good one.
it
That
is.
is one that I would actually say.
Brad Armstrong is kind of the quintessential choice for the topic tonight, but since we did a whole episode on him, I wasn't going to bring him up.
he's kind of your quintessential, I would say, 80s journeyman that you can anchor your mid card or lower around. But he had some success though, because I'm still pissed off at that stupid Jack Briscoe match they did with him in Georgia that we watched. Booking was so dumb on that.
God, that was so stupid.
But he held the national title for a while in Georgia, and then he held the North American title in Mid-South. And I highly recommend to anyone that's listening, his matches with Ted DiBiase. We did a show with those, and those were very good. Especially the house show that was like 20 minutes was really good.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he was one. He was one we brought up. So I think there's quite a few. There's quite a few people. Also, I want to say people that got internet narratives built around them that aren't necessarily true as well. So there's quite a few guys. So I think I'll start it off with one that we've explored on this show a bit through watch throughs and stuff. But Greg Valentine, I think, is a great example.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, Greg's a good choice.
And I don't think it's because anyone thinks he's bad. I just think people don't realize like how good he was.
He's
The
someone that
thing-
I've heard.
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
Sorry, Shad. He's someone who I have heard people say that basically by the time he got to the WWF, that he was already kind of washed. And I don't know if I would say that, but I also haven't seen enough of his pre-WWF stuff to know.
I would
if,
say
like,
he was still good through the Dream Team because he was like the workhorse of that team. But I think that was in an era where he didn't have to try as hard. But you know, even his like 78 and 79 stuff in WWF is pretty good.
So
I thought he
one
was
of the
really good in
things
the
that
80s.
yeah, one of the things that Greg Valentine strikes me at is it's kind of unappreciated is that Valentine is one of those guys who, in being the heel that he typically was, he wasn't doing a lot of big flashy stuff. He wasn't doing stuff that would make people happy in any way at all. You know, we had that thing where he had the great elbow drop, and they did that promo with him breaking boards with it. You know, he had the figure four, and he also had I've shook his hand before. He's got a hand like a catcher's mitt. But he's not doing anything that makes people want to like him because he's playing a heel. And so he's very intentionally like playing stuff down. And when I was younger, it took me entirely too long to actually figure that out.
I thought like 80s WWF, I mean, obviously he was part of like tag teams and he had like a role, but I felt he was almost more like a utility guy where it's like you could count on putting him in a match like the Royal Rumble and have him just like work for like 40 minutes
Mm-hmm.
and actually put in like a pretty like good performance. but he was also there. It's like you're kind of more like your mid card heel. So if you have like the up and coming baby face that you want to like actually do something with, you could have, you have Ultimate Warrior go out there and beat him up in like 4 minutes, and he would make Warrior look good, or whomever. Like
I think
you
I think a
can hire
good
Gary Von Erich for like a year as the Texas Tornado. You
I
could
think
give
a
him like a
good
quick.
I think a good Greg Valentine match for people to watch is, I think it was Beach Blast '92.
Mhm.
It was either that or Great American Bash, but it's him and Buff Bagwell, or is Marcus Bagwell. And
Yeah,
Bagwell
we
is
reviewed that on the
green.
show.
Yeah. That was
Bagwell
92.
Bagwell is green as hell, and Greg just walks him through. It's ridiculously good for what it is. Like, it's not like an all-time classic or anything, but it's probably like pushing on like a 3-star match with a guy that like barely
Yeah.
knows what he's doing, and a veteran that's kind of starting to have a foot in the washed category, and it's stupid like how
Yes.
good it is.
We reviewed this on an earlier show, so people like go back into our archives.
Yeah.
But we even commented. I think I even commented. It's like, what happened? Like to Greg Valentine, he just like got his working boots on. Maybe he wanted he's trying to impress. Like, I want a regular gig at WCW. I want a
Yeah.
contract, nice contract. So I can
It-
go out there.
I think-
I'm gonna go out there and make.
he
Buff
had
Bagwell.
that
Marcus
swank.
Bagwell look
He had
good.
that swank. He was part of the promo. Remember when we were doing the final conflict thing, and he brought the kid's picture up, and Sergeant Slaughter was putting his cigar
yeah.
out on it. He was part of that. And other good stuff. He's been in the dog collar match with Piper, obviously. The angle he did where he broke Wahoo's leg is great. Did we do that on the show?
We talked about it, but we didn't watch it.
Okay, so that's a great angle. I think that's on the. So there's these things called the garbage tapes. I think Jim Cornette sells them. So what happened is, literally, they were going to throw these away, and Jim Cornette like fished them out of the garbage, and that's the only reason we still have that footage. So that, I think that's pretty good. There's some of his stuff with Backlund's pretty good. I think he was probably, out of the Backlund WWF reign, he's probably his best opponent in that time period. And there's some stuff with Flair I've seen that's pretty good. But those would be my recommends for him.
The thing that, I said in my piece on Valentine. There's one I have on my list, two actually that are kind of from this era, and it depends, I guess, on how we define underrated. Because were they given the credit they deserved? Like, were they better than what they were given an opportunity for? Or did they have, like, a shot at something big and then never got another chance at it, even though they should have?
I approached it as people did not realize how strong of a worker they were in hindsight.
Well,
or that they were regarded highly in their era, but like there's been like brain drain over the years, and they've kind of gone by the wayside.
So my pick for that, because it seems to me not a lot of people consider, like the people that bring it up would absolutely agree that he was great, but not a lot of people bring him up and remember him. But I'm going to put John Tenta there.
Yeah.
You know what? I had him on my kind of list.
I loved going back and watching Tenta's stuff is so great because, if you're looking at it strictly through nostalgia goggles, he was the big guy that killed Damien and like crushed Hogan and had a count-out win over Hogan and all that sort of stuff. But he was, first of all, so blessed strong, and like effortlessly strong. I think Brad sent us a clip. Big Boss Man does a flying crossbody off the top, and John Tenta just catches him. He doesn't shuffle. He doesn't move. He's just like, got it. And then walks around and just does a front slam with him.
He catches him and doesn't even like lose a step. He doesn't get wobbly legged. It's like a rock. He just like,
yep.
It's amazing. And this is back when Bossman, he had not slimmed down. That he was a big boy. He was at least
I think he wasn't his
300
heaviest.
something pounds.
He wasn't his heaviest, but he wasn't like when he got thinner. But it is on my, so for those watching. I have a list. It is a list
Well,
of
hang
shows.
on, because
Well,
I had another John Tenta thing I wanted
I was
to.
going to talk about Tenna. So,
Okay, go for it.
I have a list of shows that are always like kind of on the back burner that I would like to do one day, and one of those is John Tenna in All Japan in the late '80s. Is kind of one I do want to do because, I don't know if I don't know if he's a product of All Japan like training, but that's where he started, and he teamed up with I think Baba in his first match, or no, it might have been Saruda. And I know there's a match with him against the Road Warriors. In there, and he's also really, he's an underrated like athlete too because he was a sumo. That's part of why that Katao thing went all bad. He was an amateur wrestler, and I think he did rugby in college too.
Yeah, he was football. He was an offensive lineman for LSU, I think.
He had way more like well he actually was quite athletic. But beyond that he had a lot more agility than he's probably given credit for. I think much like with a lot of guys, especially a lot of guys in that era of like the 80s and more especially I almost feel like the 90s. But he was a better worker, I felt, in Japan. I think that's a couple of reasons why. One is because obviously the Japanese like expected more, and two, like like the caliber of athlete or the style that was being worked require that you do a little more. Because especially like in the 80s, like in the 80s, like WWF, like it was not. There's good wrestling to be found, but it was very methodical, and they very much did almost like a less is more thing where you're not going to see a lot of flashy stuff.
And he was also like, he just had bad luck. So when he was big in the WWF, I would say his main run was a downturn in wrestling. They didn't really have him wrestle anyone that great. But then when he went to WCW, likewise, WCW was in a down period for like good work. So he just kind of was bad. He just kind of had bad luck with that.
And then they put him in stuff like the Dungeon of Doom. Like he was just wasted there.
Yeah.
What was his stupid?
The Shark.
Oh, okay, he was just a shark.
First wasn't he
Avalanche?
Like, he was Avalanche.
Yeah.
A play on Earthquake, obviously, but
which I don't actually hate on. I don't hate on that because it does carry over some of that recognition. But the other thing I was going to say about Tenta not just being strong, but going back and watching, and the way it jumped out at me was the comparison of the natural disasters where it was John Tenta and Uncle Fred, was just how smooth and agile Tenta was. I'm not even saying for a big guy. I just mean in general. The guy was smooth. He moved quickly. He didn't, stutter anywhere. He was just. If John Tenta was a worker today, people would be over the moon for him, and rightfully so.
He'd probably get a contract from the either WWE or AEW just because he was a big guy who was agile and strong and actually quite talented. Speaking of the shark gimmick, does anyone remember? I just pulled this from the very back of my brain. But when he was leaving that gimmick, he's gonna be John Tenta. If you recall, like he gave like he quoted. There was an infamous line now. Where he cuts a promo with Mean Gene, and he's like, "I'm not a fish, I'm a man," and it's like it belongs in WrestleCraft. Just as like this is just only in wrestling could something as absurd as this, get said in a promo in all earnestness, like you're serious, like.
But remember, Eric Bischoff is a genius.
Yep.
If anyone watching this wants a fun little side diversion from this, it happened, I think, in the spring. But watch Micah Parson versus sumo wrestlers, if you want a good little fun time. So, what's your other one, Shad?
For that era?
Yeah.
Okay, this is another, like, the guy was given credit. Well, there's two, but I know one of them is on your list, Brad. So I won't say that one. But the guy was given credit but how can I best say this? He was given credit, but it didn't feel like he was ever given the kind of credit that he should have been, if that makes sense. Like, I think he had a lot higher ceiling than he ended up with. Or maybe this is just me fanboying over someone whose work I appreciate so much. But honest to God, I think Ray Traylor was not as appreciated as he should have been.
I can see that.
He had the program with Hogan. Yeah, he had the tag title run with Ken Shamrock, but like it struck me that Ray Traylor was a better worker than capping out at the tag level. So,
well, you know how he got a spot in JCP. He took and this is big ass Ray Traylor. He took the slingshot suplex from Tully.
He went up so easy to take that bump. I mean, I've seen the clip. That's really damn impressive. So
yeah, because I mean, you're a worker, Shad, but I would assume taking the slingshot suplex is not like an easy.
No, because like to go up for the slingshot suplex, you have two steps. One, you've got to get up to the ropes for it, and then you've got to do your part to actually go over for it. So it is not easy to do.
How much do the ropes like give you?
Depends on the ropes. You know, if they're tightened up a lot, then you can get some more spring off of them. But you know, if people were being kind of lazy and didn't tighten them all the way up, then not a lot. So it's hard to that's hard to answer just because it depends so much.
Well, I mean, and the other thing that people don't realize about him is he is Hulk Hogan's highest drawing opponent.
Mm-hmm. Which is why I was kind of hesitant to put him on there, but I thought he deserved mention.
People don't realize that because they automatically go to Andre, but he only wrestled Andre twice, so they didn't hit like they drew big houses twice, but him and Boss Man did a bunch of shows, so they drew more money over a longer period of time.
Mm-hmm.
I heard that Kamala was a big Hogan draw. Like they made a lot of money.
I wouldn't be shocked.
Like,
but I think
that Killer Khan was actually like a shockingly
he was
good draw for Hogan. The problem with Hogan is like a sidebar. The problem with Hogan is that whole like Hogan versus the Monster Heel thing works like gangbusters in the 80s, and then in the mid 90s, long after that formula had died out, like Hogan got to WCW and he just tried to replicate that for like a couple years. It just was not working.
There's a shoot.
People are over it. Like
there's a shoot with Kevin Sullivan talking about the Dungeon of Doom. I mean, he pretty much says he had to get Hogan off the smack, but he said he had to do all that like dumb, kooky stuff with him because that's what Hogan was comfortable with, and he needed him to like trust him to then do better stuff with him. Which I don't know if I totally buy that, but I could see his logic in that. Which, by the way, I don't know what happened to him, because they have that go
sort of health. He had like some sort of health scare, but I don't know the specifics. About
it.
It was his leg or something, wasn't it?
He had something happen and he started throwing. Yeah, I think he broke his leg, and in the treatment, he started throwing clots.
Okay,
was what happened.
Yeah,
I think that's right.
That rings of what I remember. But
Hogan, but to go back to that, Hogan could probably get away with that because he had basically full creative control in his contract, which that goes. I wanted to make a point a second ago about Eric Bischoff, that Eric Bischoff, the genius. I shouldn't recommend another show, but people should go back and listen to old episodes of The Lapse Fan, where they discuss, especially their Starrcade episodes, when they discuss in depth Starrcade 94, 95, somewhere like when Hogan comes in, and they discuss at length, including with Meltzer, about Hogan and the contract he signed. And it's like, if you really want to know why, like, place like WCW folded, it's because really there's multiple reasons, but I mean, that contract was a good reason why. Like, it was insane. Like, if anyone, any worker in the business today tried to get the contract that he got out of WCW, like, they'd be laughed out of. Even Tony Khan, who it pays his people fairly, it seems, or will pay high money for free agents, like, he would be like, no, like,
Like I think
fuck off,
I
like,
think
that you're
there
not going to
were
get that.
I think there were situations under that contract. I would have to listen to I think Bix and Zellner have talked about in the past, but I think there were situations where they could literally at some points drawing better or getting better buy rates was actually worse for the bottom line because Hogan got more of it.
Yeah, there was. I remember reading high points from it. There were things like Hogan, for every pay-per-view that he was involved in, and I think contractually he had to be involved in 10 out of the 12 in a given year or something like that. If the buy rate was below a certain amount, he got a flat rate. If it was above a certain amount, he got 15-20% of the profit from the buy rate on that pay-per-view. And he got like 10-15% on that every house that he appeared on the card for, and stuff like that. In addition to merchandising, in addition to baseline contract stuff, and bonuses and all that sort. And I looked at all this and I was sorry. I looked at all this and I was like, I mean, were you negotiating against a block of wood? Is that how do you roll over for all of that?
That's the genius of Eric Bischoff, but it's insane. Like, and Meltzer's even kind of talked about this, because I mean, they I guess Vice did this whole like who killed WCW, and it's like multiple people, but you know, it was basically I didn't watch the show, but apparently it was a whitewashing of Eric Bischoff trying to rehabilitate his image, and it's like Eric Bischoff has his hand, like, of the many people, there's multiple reasons why WCW failed and died, but if you really want to know, if you want to put a blame on someone, you should. There's a lot of blood on those hands where he contributed a lot to that. But
I mean, they really. You can throw as much stuff as you want around about WCW, but the truth of the matter is, it's because Turner Broadcasting decided they wanted to be more upscale and canceled it, and that's 100% of the reason. If they had not canceled the TV, they would probably still be around in some capacity.
They were on the upswing there at the end, weren't they?
I think that's right. They had stabilized a little bit.
Business-wise, I'm not entirely sure, but creatively, I would say
yes. Yeah, the product was a lot better.
I think they were. I think
they did 3 pay-per-views in 2021, and they were all actually January, February, March. They were all like reasonably good.
The problem is they were they were murdered in like 2000. So I think they were creatively on the upswing, but I think they would have had to have kept that up for like 6 or 7 months to even like see that really hit the. Like I think the bleeding had stopped at that point, but like I think they had a long way to go to like kind of instill, because they still had a lot of problems too.
There was, if I remember this correctly, there was an executive who just straight up wanted to get rid of them. It did not matter how well they were doing. It did not. They could have been making money hand over fist, and this guy would have gotten rid of them anyway.
Turner Broadcasting in the 90s was run by idiots, because it's kind of lost to the annals of history, but they had an extremely popular cartoon called SWAT Cats, and it was really popular at the time, and they canceled it because Turner didn't like the violence in it. And then they preemptively canceled Animaniacs, and then they decided to team up Pinky and the Brain with Elmira and killed that show. But no, SWAT Cats, like, literally because Turner doesn't like, because he wanted to do more crappy Captain Planet stuff, but he didn't like the violence in it. And they canceled
it. Only had like 2 seasons, didn't it?
And it was super popular.
It was, the animation in it was outstanding.
Yeah. So what do we have do you have a person for our list, Matt?
Yeah, you know what? This is almost like a minor one, but I'm gonna put him just because I think people just remember him from his WWF period, in which case he was effectively almost like a jobber to the stars, but he wasn't anyone who really won anything of importance. He wasn't even in like necessarily high like notable feuds. But I'm gonna go with Coco Beware,
Mm,
uh, because he was an absolutely phenomenal worker. Um, but it was most of his stuff is that you could actually see that is like pre WWF. Because once he got the WWF,
He got fat.
he got fat. But I mean, he was also short. But he was basically just like a jobber to the stars. Like I guess to the extent he had any sort of push,
yeah.
they did for a brief period when they
What,
put him like
teaming
Owen
with
Hart.
Owen? Yeah.
Yeah, and high energy in
Yeah.
the early '90s when they wore this weird like
It was
neon
it was
glow
Hello Fellow Kids of the
pajama
90s.
pants.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Parachute
which was
Dayglow parachute pants.
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that team didn't last that long. Probably, I had to look it up, but I would say it's 6 months, and in reality, it's probably like less than that. But I mean, he got some pay-per-view stuff. Like he was one of those guys that's like Hogan. I guess I could put anyone with Hogan. It's like they would actually have matches for Survivor Series, but then it's like it's Hogan's team. It's like Hulk Hogan, and then it'd be like Hillbilly Jim and Coco Beware. It's like the Scrubs
Yeah.
would team with Hogan, but it didn't matter because all anyone cared about was Hogan in that match. But
Yeah.
he got that like for a couple of years, but he wasn't really used much in the WWF,
He
which is a
has
shame
Coco has one of my
because he
favorite
was
clips of all time.
when he
Is
murders the
oh
jobber.
yeah, so if you we I don't know if we've talked about on this, so it's like this guy comes to job under a mask, and they figure out he's an outlaw guy, so they get in the ring, and Coco just murders this guy. Like he does a clothesline, and it's just like meat on meat, and then he's pinning the guy after he didn't kill him with the Ghostbuster, but then he just pinned the guy. He just smacks him in the face
Yeah.
while he's doing it.
He just slapped him during the 3 count.
And then there's also the infamous. It was like a battle royal for a TV title, and the TV title was a TV. And then Jimmy Valiant got mad and smashed the TV.
So one of my favorite things about Coco Ware is straight up was he did my favorite brainbuster I've ever seen anybody do. The Ghostbuster was an awesome brainbuster. And to my knowledge, he never hurt anybody with it. I could be wrong. It's happened before, it'll happen again. But I love his brainbuster. It is so good.
He also he also had a pretty infamously good tag team with Bobby Eaton in Memphis, and then
Yeah.
he worked Southern Territories
Memphis.
with Norville Austin as the Pretty Young Things, which I have a real affinity for them because the matches they're in are always like train wreck brawls that are a lot of fun.
hmm In like today's age, where there's so much wrestling content available, and I don't even mean like old content. I mean, if you are a fan of just modern wrestling and you want to watch, like, obviously you can watch AEW, WWE, TNA, but if you were like, I love indie wrestling, there's so many different avenues to watch indie wrestling now. There's Triller, which used to be Fight TV. There's like IWTV, that's out there, like you can subscribe to. There's different streaming services you can subscribe to. There's Japanese content you can watch. There's tons of like content out there that you can watch. Like
I think
indie
High
guys
Spots has a service.
Yeah, there's so much. Like you literally could just consume hours of wrestling content a week. Like you literally could, like, if you work your 9 to 5 job, come home
Yeah.
and just like watch wrestling for like hours if you want to, and not be like replicating stuff where it's like you're watching the same stuff. There's so much content out there, even like small indie promotion stuff. That said, what my preface to all that is that if Coco Beware is like the modern era, he wasn't signed to a major contract, he was just doing indie stuff, like he would absolutely be a guy that had like a lot of buzz because he was a good worker, and him going out there and just murdering guys with a drop kick or the Ghostbuster brainbuster, like he would catch buzz. Like, so I feel like he's someone who, because of the circumstances and how he was used in the 80s, like he's kind of lost in the shuffle.
Mm-hmm.
but he kind of deserved it because he was a good
Yeah.
worker.
I would agree with
In a
that.
different era, like the modern era, would have gotten a lot more. He would have been an indie darling, or he would have been signed and probably having like interesting matches. You'd probably see him, at the least, you'd probably see him pop up on like Ring of Honor, having good matches with people. So
I think
It
he would have
makes
made
sense.
AEW in the modern era.
he probably would have.
So I'm going to bring up. It's kind of along the one Matt talked about. So most people remember him from WWF. He's pretty washed by then. Actually, he was refereeing a lot in the WWF. So we did a match with him and Ric Flair on the show that we highly enjoyed. So this is Ronnie Garvin.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
People probably just remember as like a broken down guy in WWF. He wasn't really a great fit there, but we did. So it was from TV, like I think the Christmas episode of like World Championship Wrestling in 1985, and it's him and Flair, and it's just them just stiffing the ever loving crap out of each other for like 15 minutes, and it's awesome.
Mhm. Well, Garvin had the infamous match with Greg Valentine. That was really good, but it was just amount to the two of them just beating the shit out of each other, just stiffing each other, like throwing bombs at each other. And I felt it had, excuse me, it had like a realness to it. It had like a little bit of that like JCP or Memphis or Southern style like grit to it, where it's like they've started blurring lines because you can tell they're just like potatoing each other and like really being stiff, which was kind of uncharacteristic of WWF at the time because it was a little more sanitized and not as cartoon as it would get. But I mean, obviously, it heavily leaned into kind of a kid-friendly almost type of thing.
Yeah.
But that was a great match. But Garvin's a good pick because he actually was a good worker. There's just controversy because it's like people think that he didn't deserve to win the NWA title, and I could see the reasons why.
So the way they did that, I used to think that, but the way they did that, just to put it on someone, to put it back on Flair, I was like, you know what, like Garvin was a good pick for that because he had like a long history in the business. He was aging, like he only had a couple years left. Like if you just do a quick hot shot reign, like he really doesn't lose anything from it, and like he's a name. So I actually think that in hindsight, I actually think that was like a decent pick because like you don't want to waste it on like someone that you might like want to push later down the road. Frank in the chat brings up Ron Bass, which we haven't done a lot of Ron Bass on the show, but when I did a watch through of like 85 JCP, he was actually a really fun highlight of that for me.
I haven't really seen anything but his WWF stuff,
which is his worst stuff.
Yeah, Frank in the chat says that he wasn't good, and I generally agree. I don't say it was bad, but I just feel it was didn't really do a whole lot, except that we
didn't know how to use.
He was in that Survivor Series, one of the Survivor Series we just reviewed a while back. I think it was 87 or 88. Yeah, he was in like one of the tag matches, and that's tough because it's a multi-man match, so it's like he's not going to be in the ring more than like a few minutes at a time. But I thought he was fine there. But outside of that, and like the feud he had with Beefcake, it's like they didn't really do much with them. So I didn't think it was bad. It was just like just there, like blinking you miss him. Like people probably don't remember the name Ron Bass.
I think the problem with guys like him is you go to WWF and like part of your selling point in other areas was you're a good talker and you're big. But then you go to WWF and everyone's big and then they don't give you time to talk. So what are you supposed to do? Or they try to give you a manager. Like they try to give you like Grand
Wizard.
or the Reverend Slick, and then you can't talk and get yourself over. And I think
your
that
talking amounts to like maybe like a 2-minute promo segment in the back
where you're mean mugging for
if that. Yeah. Oh, you're mean mugging for like a minute 30 of that 30 seconds while Slick or Mean Gene is talking, and then you got 30 minutes to like spout a couple lines saying you're gonna beat your opponent, and that's it. So
we have to do CWF.
You have to mean mug and be like all acting all crazy.
We have to do more CWF because I think we've only done I think we did a Flair versus Butch Reed match from CWF. I think is the only thing we've done, and we didn't like it.
Is CWF Championship Wrestling in Florida?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
There's some
I
good
think-
stuff. There's some good stuff
Brad.
from there.
Am I wrong, or was it CWF that was like the infamous clip where Kevin Sullivan just cool cocks
Yeah.
Luna Vachon?
Yeah, because that's
Oh my God. I've mentioned that before for Frank or anyone who have never seen that. There used to be, I think I first saw it back, like this is going back before the WWE Network, or the abysmal, like sad copy of what it is now on Peacock. But before WWE Network, when it was like the WWE's like on-demand service. Remember that?
Oh, 24/7?
WWE 24/7, which actually wasn't bad. I think it was like,
Yeah, because you would
it
get
was also like $10.
yeah, and
You get
it was a 2-week cycle. So then you would get a new World Championship Wrestling. You would get a new ECW. They do the Monday Night Wars. You get like I don't know, like 4 or 5 pay-per-views of various age, and then you get
some of it was a lot of it, most of it was older content, but you would get the modern pay-per-views, but it would just be like 3-4 months after the fact. So if it's like June, maybe July, it's now July, like maybe now you'd get like WrestleMania.
yeah, and
It'd
but
be
I mean,
it'd be like a delay, but
you'd get a good, I would say you'd get a good 30 to 50 hours of stuff every 2 weeks. I mean, I know there were
You
some
get good
weekends I
content.
would just gorge on like, and I mean, I have DVDs sitting around. Like I have like tons of stuff I recorded onto DVD off of there.
they would show like old house shows, and some of it should be
Mhm.
like 70s, 80s, which a lot of it was like not great. It'd be like, here's Vera and Mike Cicluna versus like Salvatore Belomo, and it's like, ugh. Like, let me watch Johnny Rods in a 20-minute match with Jose Luis Rivera.
Oh no, the worst was
Isn't-
and I swear to God, there was like a 3-year period where they were on every show. It was SD Jones and Baron Mikkel Scaluna like having like
Yeah.
20-minute matches. I swear I've seen that
Oh, yeah.
match like 80 times, and it's just as bad as it sounds.
Jeez.
Yeah, this is also where my my hatred of the fake Indian.
Oh yeah, Chief.
Chief J Strongbow, like worst in the running for worst worker of all time. But they showed like they were randomly put like some of their catalog of content, which is like obscenely large on the
Mhm.
network, and they did show some championship wrestling from Florida. Usually they would throw stuff like that if it's like themed, or they're trying to highlight people, like they're trying to highlight like Dusty Rhodes or something like that, because Dusty was big in Florida. But they showed a clip of that, and it was Kevin Sullivan, and I forget what the angle was. I think it was like Luna Vachon was playing like some like fan or so, or somebody, like he was giving
She
an award
eventually
to some other
joined them
worker.
based off of that, I think.
Yeah, but he hauls off and he punches her in the face. And I told you before, I don't think he worked that punch. He just like punched her, and her head like snaps back, and she like flails around.
It
And
did not.
I
look
remember watching
very
that,
work.
and I'm jaded. At this point, when I watched this, it was like 10 years ago. It was a long time ago. But I remember that maybe over 10. But when I'm jaded, like I've watched wrestling a long time. I lived through like the Monday Night Wars and ECW, and I'd see death matches and all that. And he did this to him, and I was like, oh my God. I like clutched my chest, like my pearls. Like I'm like shocked that he did this. It was something.
The frustrating thing with CWF is like there's not like you can't get a good chunk of it like you can other territories. It's really weird and really frustrating, and WWE's like never put it out, because that's the thing, like Mid-South, like you can get Mid-South from like the end of 81 to the end. Like Memphis is spotty until like 83 or 84, but you can get like 80% of the TV from 79 to the end. Well, I'd say more like 90 when you balance it all out. Like Mid-Atlantic's all out there, but like for some reason Florida just is real spotty. Like there's a couple years you can get, but they're like the years you don't want. But like you would think like in that 79 to like 83 territory, like you'd have stuff, but it's real spotty, and it drives me nuts, because it's one I would love. Like there's people that speak really highly of it, and obviously Frank in the chat has seen a lot of it, and they speak highly of it, and I really want to see it, but like it's hard to find.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
AWA's spotty
unfortunate.
like that too, and Stampede's real spotty like that as well.
That's
But
unfortunate. Yeah, I was about to say that's unfortunately like a lot of promotions that have had a big influence actually are like that. I mean, we've referenced them, and I know we want to watch more content from them, but like Portland, we were lucky to have anything because what wasn't Buddy Rose like
taping
just
himself,
personally
yeah.
taped? Yeah, and that's like that. It's crazy that Portland, which is I guess a lot of people don't know about, and I haven't even seen that much of, but was obviously hugely influential, especially for very famous workers like Roddy Piper. Like he had a huge run there, and that content like isn't really available except for this fact, except
Yeah.
for the fact that like Buddy Rose is like, yeah, I'm gonna like just like tape it myself on VHS.
Yeah, Buddy
Like that's how we
Rose,
have the content, really.
Buddy Rose Piper, Raven got his start there. A noted murderer that we won't talk about. Well, I guess not. No,
That actually,
alleged.
sadly, in wrestling, like that it's not like one guy. You think that you'd almost would need to narrow it down a little more than
Oh,
that.
a certain crazy person that allegedly murdered a woman earlier this year.
Oh, okay.
Billy Jack Haynes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. I needed a second to catch back up with you there.
It just happened. What that was like? Was that April? It was real recent.
Yeah, it was this year. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I forgot about that.
the grappler. Quite a few people. But that's also on the list that's coming up really soon because we haven't done any Portland, so we're gonna dive into some Portland because I think we're all. They were actually too. Portland was one of the last territories to survive as well because they owned their own building. Because they lasted
That's
until like
interesting.
91 or 92, I think.
That is very interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
So-
I also have. We won't spend a lot of time on him because we've sang his praises before, but like Lex Luger is in the underrated territory. He's starting to get some redemption there because, especially Brian Alvarez and Vinny have like started watching this stuff, and they went on this. They actually put it on their YouTube where they went off about how Luger always stepped to the plate and did a good job, and like the booking screwed him each and every time.
Mm-hmm.
And we did stuff during the Dangerous Alliance stuff, and like people are gonna be like, "Oh, you mean he's like above average?" Like, no, he was good. Like straight up, he was
He
good.
was actually,
He was really good.
yeah. That was one of the that's. There are many things as I've said before. I've said to you guys in private and everything that I really think have been positives about the show. It's not just doing the show with two friends. Like that's fun, and obviously talking to people like Frank in the chat, talking about this stuff. But I've loved that we have actually been exposed to a lot of content doing the show and stuff that I wouldn't necessarily have gone back to or taken the time to watch. And you learn
Mhm.
things. And one of the things is that you can change your mind about workers or shows or events. And Luger was one because I always, if you had asked me before we actually watched some of his stuff, what your impression of Luger, I'd been like, he's fine. Like I didn't hate him, but I also was like, kind of whatever. Like he's okay, I guess. But watching him, it's like, no, actually, my opinion on Luger has dramatically improved, and he was actually good. He was a good worker. He was much better than people give him credit for.
Mm-hmm.
He actually could. He had stuff down, and I think like the early '90s stuff in WCW really shows like he was good. And I do think he was unfortunately hampered, which a lot of guys were like the '90s, with booking.
Yeah.
Timing and booking.
He had the injury too, the motorcycle accident. I think.
Yeah.
Kind of.
And there were
that
weird things. Like he probably should have gotten the title and a bigger push, even though he got a push in WWF. But he probably should have got the title and had a run there. But I don't know.
Even speaking of his WWF run, though, that King of the Ring '93 match with Tatanka, I was shocked at how much I liked that match.
Mm-hmm.
They did a really good job with that match. Yeah.
And along his lines, I'm not going to go too deep into it either because I have enough empirical evidence from this show to say Andre the Giant was like legitimately an extremely good worker. Because even I know Shad wasn't big on Killer Khan, but even that Killer Khan stretcher match where he's just systematically destroying him was a really good match.
This is another example, as we mentioned before, like that his pre-WWF stuff is where you really have to see to appreciate that. And we have seen enough of, I think, pre-WWF Andre, or even early, I guess, WWF Andre.
Because he was in WWF through the 70s. Pre rock and wrestling Andre, let's say.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Just to see his level of work, and it's like he was actually really good. Like really good. Like way better than he even needed to be for the size that he was. Like he could have just been what he was in later years when his mobility was dramatically decreased, or he's just a big dude. It's like, let me just do like a minimal of moves and it could work because I am legitimately gigantic compared to every single other person that I'm stepping into the ring with, even the big guys like Killer Khan.
Yeah.
Like I'm big, and so I can just do like a couple power moves and like easily sell it and people would buy it. Like he was doing crazy stuff. Like when he was younger and more mobile, obviously, doing shit like drop kicks and stuff. And it's like, dude, you're doing a lot.
And we watched that. We watched that match from like France from like the late '60s with him too. But I also
did a head scissors takeover in that damn match.
Yeah.
Also, one of my favorites though is like, stop all that rhyming. I mean it. Anybody want a peanut?
So, Brad, there's one that I'm kind of itching to get to that's I know is on your list.
Okay.
And that the question is whether you know him by his real name, whether you know him as Big Josh, or whether you know him as Doink. Giving Matt Bourne credit.
Oh yeah, that's a really good pick because now he's another one. We unintentionally explored him extensively. He's also a Portland guy too, but so we did his WWF series with Mr. Perfect as Doink, which I was really taken with that. I thought that was a great series of matches there. The way they were doing limb work was fascinating. Because
they kept continuity between the matches.
Yeah, because so what they were doing was so they were attacking each other based entirely around the perfect plex. So Doink I think was attacking his arm so he couldn't do it, but then Henning was attacking the leg that he hooked. Yeah, that he hooks. And it was very fascinating, and they like built off of their matches really interesting. And I also appreciated the fact because he had a match with Savage and he rode like a unicycle to the ring, and I'm like, I respect that he was so like he was so like into that gimmick that he learned to ride a unicycle for that.
Yeah. How can I best put this? Because we watched during that Dangerous Alliance stretch, there were some folks that just, well, I mean, Big Josh was on a lot of those shows. And the hell of it is that even though Big Josh, I'm doing air quotes, swish, swish, Big Josh was not really big in comparison to everybody else.
Yeah, they were billing him as like 275 pounds. We were
like, no, that's no.
I remember,
but he still worked very well, and oddly, he kind of worked this pseudo big man style. He was not a big man, but he kind of sort of worked like it.
Yeah,
and it really worked.
Hey, it's Brat Pack too, which is what Frank. Remember that we were watching that one? I think it was a tag where he kept trying to punch Rude in the stomach, and Rude would just brush it off because his abs were so.
Yeah.
So who was he teaming with? I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
But yeah, he's a great pick because there was, I would say legitimately, because I've watched a lot of '93 WWF. I would say he was probably the third best worker in the company that year.
The other thing that I really enjoyed about Matt Bourne was that in the course of just his Doink stuff, the guy, like, he's doing all this, and yeah, he's doing the clown bit. Sorry.
It's okay.
I have never seen anybody do a stump puller as viciously as I saw Matt Bourne do as Doink the Clown. I mean, he took what looks like a move that you'd be like, all right, that's a good finish, or that's a decent submission to, oh God, stop, dude, quit, leave him alone.
He did
like,
I actually thought, I didn't think that's where you're going to go. I thought you were going to go with his exaggerated expressions and how he went to like that dark, like kind of mean expression that he would get when he was doing the doink thing. And how
did he go from this to
like,
I love that as a kid. Yeah, he'd be like
yeah,
this big scowl on his face, and like the music would turn all sinister, and I appreciated that. Like, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And he also has my favorite angle from that year where he was doing something with Crush and he pretended like he had a broken arm and Crush like did something. He pulled his arm off and started beating him with it.
Yeah.
Which
because
still makes me laugh.
He had a fake arm and a sling. That was the same feud where he quote unquote smashed Crush in the head with a car battery.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, obviously it's gimmicked, but on the other hand, I mean, damn, dude, that is a hell of an evocative thing to use for a weapon, right?
Yeah.
So, props.
You know what? Just now thinking about the Doink character, this is like a sign of the times. And nowadays, everything is like, at least in WWE, it's like vignettes, or here's a QR code you should scan. And it's like, ugh. But I remember like he kind of debuted because like for a few weeks before, like on the TV, they'd have like random guys like having him. It's like, here's Crush beating up a job or whatever. And the Vince McMahon or whoever was like announcing at the time, he's like, oh, look at that, there's a clown in the crowd. And you just see Doink and he'd just be like doing weird stuff in the crowd. And it was like for like 5 seconds, and then it's like back to the action. They don't mention it again.
Yeah.
And they did that for like a while. Then all of a sudden, he's like down at ringside and like doing weird stuff with fans. And it's like, what is this? And it's like all of a sudden, he's squirting flowers onto Crush or Tito Santana or somebody. Like,
remember they did that weird
and then
thing
it went off from there. But I kind of appreciated like the simplistic way to debut him of sorts.
Remember they did that vignette, I think during one of the Perfect matches, maybe it was the Savage one, where I think he stole like Lord Alfred Hayes's tie or something, and then he had it like they did it in the vignette, then he had it out in the ring.
Yeah.
Which was a fun little side thing they did. There was someone else I was going to
consideration paid for by the following.
There was someone else from this era I was going to say, and then I totally forgot. Who? Oh, that's going to drive me nuts. Oh, Dustin Rhodes. So Dustin Rhodes.
Oh God, yes.
Kind of didn't get credit in that era because like everyone thought he was like a nepo baby, and then you go back and it's like, no, he's legitimate. He was
good.
And his tag team,
Dustin.
And I want to argue from what we've seen, his tag team with Barry Windham would be close to Mount Rushmore good for me from what I've seen of them as a team.
I can see that. I mean, Barry Windham being a very, very good veteran for it, but it's not like Dustin was just the plucky underdog to get beat up. Like, Dustin was pulling his weight the entire time.
No, and he was
Dustin in the early.
It was a good.
In the early '90s was legit, like good to great.
And it was a smart. It was a smart team though, because Dustin was so big, they put him with someone that was bigger than him, so he could still be the sympathetic rookie. Because he's like what 6'5", and like I think Barry's like 6'7", but like that was a smart pairing. I thought they complemented each other well with like how their offense works. Like Dustin has the more everyman offense. Barry has some flashier stuff. I thought they just had good chemistry together. And Dustin is an excellent tag worker. Like the book does stuff where, we just talked about this on the indie stuff, but the way he times his comebacks, the way he structures his matches, like the match he had with Cody at the first Double or Nothing is still probably top 5 AEW matches, top 3.
Keep cooking, Brad. You're doing great. Keep going.
And the way he bled in that one, that's still an awesome.
And he did all of that without like dramatically overselling or anything. It is just solid work over and over again, but it keeps drawing you in and keeps drawing you in, and I love it. It's honestly, if I could have sat under the learning tree with Dustin Rhodes for a while, I probably I know. Honestly, my career probably would have gone on for a lot longer, and I would have been a lot better. Just so good, so good.
To go back really quickly, I'm trying to look up like what when it happened. I think it was like 92, 93.
Mm-hmm.
But to go back to the Dustin Rhodes, Barry Windham tag team.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to look up. Oh, okay. So it was. Do you remember like they in 92, towards the end of 92, they actually won the tag titles from the Miracle Violence Connection.
Yes, unfortunately, because we had to watch. Oh God, I'm getting flashbacks to that NWA title tournament, and so much boring Miracle Violence Connection.
The match they had for two guys who were like world class, like great like wrestlers. Like I still don't know why they had such a relatively boring match with the Steiners. Like
because
is like on my Mount Rushmore practically.
I blame Bill Watts.
Wrestling tag teams of all time.
I blame Bill Watts for that. I think they got in their head and they wanted them to do like this legit athlete, because I hated it when we watched it, because Terry and Steve are out there like breathing fire, I'm Mr. Intensity, and then I'm going to get in the ring and I'm going to work the leg for 25 minutes straight.
Yeah, it was like slow.
It's a mat work match from these guys who were sold as these big nasty ass kickers. And I don't know, man. It
was not good.
It was so disappointing. It's like this should not be happening here. And yet it did.
Yeah.
So,
but I want to go back. This is like random. This is the things that go off in my brain sometimes, like the weird connections and things you remember.
Mm-hmm.
But I looked it up. It was Clash of the Champions 21 in I think November 92.
Okay.
And it was Dustin and Barry putting in the main event titles on the tag titles on the line against the team of Ricky Steamboat and Shane Douglas. Because if you recall, like Shane Douglas was briefly in WCW in like 92, 93.
Well, they had the tag titles he and Steamboat had the tag titles for a little bit, didn't they?
Well, they won the tag titles in this match, and it was weird because it was like face team versus face team, and there's a sequence at the end, and this was actually the turn Barry Windham turns on Dustin, but there was a sequence at the end where Dustin and Ricky are in the ring and they're like doing a sequence, and Ricky like goes for like he jumps up, the classic spot where the guy jumps up and the other guy like ducks down underneath him and like is running the ropes. But in this case, obviously a planned spot, but Dustin doesn't go down far enough when Ricky jumps up, so he essentially like low blows him, like headbutts him as a low blow. But because Dustin is an honorable man and Ricky's friend, like he feels so conflicted. He's like, he doesn't want to like immediately pin Ricky, even though it was accidental. He didn't intend to low blow him. He doesn't want to immediately pin him, win the match. And he doesn't do this. And Barry Windham on the tag just goes fucking bonkers, where it's like, what are you doing? Like pin him, like goes crazy. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because this was a callback to 5 years earlier, because it was a spot that happened to Barry Windham, where the same thing happened, ironically, to the aforementioned Steve Williams. And Barry Windham didn't pin Steve Williams when he had that opportunity, and ultimately lost the match because he didn't take that opportunity. And 5 years later, he is seeing history repeat itself. And so in that match, like, Dustin doesn't take control. And what happens? Ricky Steamboat and Shane Douglas actually, a few minutes later, managed to actually score the pinfall, and they win the titles. And that is enough to Barry Windham. That's the big turn. Like, he just flips out on Dustin, and I think gives him like the big like implant DDT, and like turns heel.
Wow.
And unfortunately, not much came with that, because Barry Windham was in the company a little bit longer than like left. But it was like a great callback. But they were a fantastic team for a team that didn't last as long as they should have. I would actually say, in a weird way, like, Barry Windham to me is kind of a pick. And I say that only because like he actually was a star in the 80s. 90s not as much.
Yeah.
But I actually saw, and I've mentioned this before to you guys, I don't know if I've mentioned on the show, but I listened to a shoot that Barry did, like, from the aughts. Like, this is
Was that one of
old.
those one of those terrible like RF ones where you can barely hear him talk, and there's probably like an air conditioning like?
It may have been an RF one, but I could hear him talk pretty well. But I found it really fascinating because he gave the shoot, and at the end, he was they were asking questions, and it's almost one of those like gotcha ones where it's like, why don't you trash another worker? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you spilled some dirt on another worker. Where he's asked the question, it's like, is there a guy that like or like you worked with or whatever that you feel like didn't live up to their potential? It's like a very loaded question.
Yeah.
And he had a remarkable moment of self-reflection that I don't feel like a lot of pro wrestlers have. And he was quiet for a second, and he's like, yeah, like me. Like, I didn't live up to my potential. And he's very honest about it, how like look, I will say this, and I believe it, and there are people who probably agree with me, is that there was periods of time in, like, I would say late 80s, years maybe, or at least points of time in the 80s, you could argue, and I believe I think with validity, that Barry was top 5, top 10 in the world.
87, like those matches he had with Flair, that worldwide like draw they had is just outstanding. But I will say,
he was at least one of the best workers in the world.
great
any
tag
country.
Worker. Now I will say
Yeah.
one I think it's true. He was his own worst enemy. The one thing I will defend him on though, is he did have those number of years. So he did have, what's that, 90? It might have been 92 or 93. So he had a knee injury, and they put in like a corpse ligament.
A cadaver.
Oh yeah.
Tendon.
And
Yeah.
then he was having a match with Muda, and it just like disintegrated on him.
Yeah.
He was hampered by injuries. He was also mostly hampered by his family issues. Like, his dad, Kendall, his dad, Blackjack Mulligan, and Kendall, I think, both got like popped for counterfeiting money.
They did because when Herb Abrams announced the UWF, he said Blackjack Mulligan was going to be booking, and he was literally still in jail for counterfeiting. I think he also announced Brody was going to be a part of the promotion, and Brody was obviously dead at that point. But
Oh god.
But yeah, but he also but like in 98 and 99 when he came back to WCW, that was an underrated, pretty good run.
Yeah.
I think that I haven't seen a single second of footage, but I think it may exist, but I had heard that in like the late 90s, like early 2000s, like there was like a period where Dusty Rhodes had, was it Turnbuckle Championship? Turnbuckle Wrestling?
Yeah.
He did a promotion that did not last long, like a year or two.
I've
maybe.
seen some video of it, I think.
Okay. But I had heard that Barry was part of that, and Barry was actually having like really good matches in that, but I've seen nothing of it.
It wouldn't shock me because if Dusty when Dusty ran that, he probably was using a lot of his Florida buddies, and Barry would be one of those. It's actually funny if you go back and watch. I think we might have seen a match of it. But you go back and watch Mid Atlantic in the early '80s. Barry's there. He's very young, but he's wrestling as Black Jack Mulligan Jr.
Mm.
And it's just kind of funny. He doesn't. He's doing like the Black Jack Mulligan thing. It's just kind of a funny little thing with him. But I agree. He's the weirdest guy of the absolute highest highs and like the lowest lows.
Yeah, he was such a good worker in the '80s, and then I think Frank in the chat brings it like he's pretty much right. It's like Barry's worst enemy was Barry.
Yeah.
But again, like the shoot that I watched, like he was remarkably candid about that, where he kind of acknowledged like, yeah, like I didn't live up to my potential, and he wasn't blaming that on anyone but himself. Like he made bad choices. Obviously, you mentioned like there were some real life things like an injury, but he probably could have been more than he should have. At least like once you could start going to like the '90s. Although also true, it's like it was such a weird time. Like I've thought about recently because he obviously a few months back ended his career. It's like Sting had his essentially like a retribution run in AEW and really cemented, I feel, his legacy. But it shouldn't have had to come to that because people should have already like people like Dave Meltzer, who I think is world-class wrestling historian. Dave has done a lot of positives for wrestling as a whole, but I don't like a lot of Dave's opinions on certain things. One of them being like he's never maybe recently he's changed his mind, but historically he didn't feel it.
Well, I think the
worthy of
reader
the Hall of Fame, and like that's absolutely nonsense. But I think Sting unfortunately was also hampered by bad booking, and unfortunately his heyday was in the '90s when he was the ace of WCW at points.
Yeah.
But then came in and threw things off. So
Sting is a good example of when people act like the Observer readers just do whatever Dave says. Like, no, they pushed. Like Sting is largely in the Hall of Fame because the voters kind of went against Dave on that one, and made it happen.
They defied the edict, so to speak.
Yeah. So when people say that they just like they're just a rubber stamp for Dave, like no, there's examples of like he does shape opinions, but there are examples where they've gone and done different things than what he said. Now another great one, because we did an episode on him, and it's not like I don't think people have seen enough of him really because of his era, and footage is a little sparse of him, but Pat Patterson is one that I think really, when I started like seeing footage of him, like, oh wow, he's like really good, because it's also because I think the one I send people all the time when you want to show them like an actual good WWF match from the '70s, it's him and Ted DiBiase. Like that one they had for like the North American title that's just stupid good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you.
His Sergeant Slaughter match, that tag, it was like him and Ray Stevens versus like Billy Robinson and some other nothing I don't remember. But yeah, he's a good quick one. Is there any others that you guys have?
Yeah, I've got a few from the mid to late '90s era that I look, and maybe these are personal ones to me, but I look at them and I'm like, first of all, they're not talked about anymore, and second, I think they should have had higher heights than they did. And the first one is this is an old pocket pick for me because I always loved watching the guy work. And there was one unfortunate incident that didn't do him any favors, but I feel like D'Lo Brown should have gotten more credit than he does.
Yeah, I think the problem he has is when he was really hitting his stride, the Dross thing happened, and then they kind of pushed him, and like he never got his mojo back until he was out of WWE and then like TNA and All Japan, and he kind of got his like groove back, and then no one saw him.
This is random, but I actually thought a few years back when he was actually doing commentary for TNA, like I didn't think he was terrible.
No, he was
Like
okay.
he wasn't like the best color commentator, but he was actually perfectly fine, I felt.
Yeah, he was fine.
Yeah.
He was, I would say, unspectacular but solid.
Yeah. Like if they still had him doing commentary, like I think would be fine. Like
Yeah.
So
it wasn't flashy. He's not going to rank up there as like some of the most entertaining, but he was like I think you're right, Brad. He's solid.
and the thing that I really appreciated about D'Lo is how smooth he was. You everything, and this is going off of memory, obviously, but what I remember from watching D'Lo is how well everything flowed from one thing into the next. You didn't have like hard stops or stutters or anything. It just one thing moved into the next very smoothly, and I really enjoyed watching that. So, another mid late '90s that I think deserves better than he got, and especially when he jumped over to WWF. Poor guy got made into a joke. But I'm thinking like the high point of me seeing him was in WCW, but Perry Saturn. I feel like
I actually had written in my notes Perry Saturn.
had you really?
Yeah.
You know, it's funny.
kinda-
I was doing research for this, and I'm like, maybe I'll find something, and people will be like, oh, here, I'll find some diamond in the rough, and people are like, unappreciated workers of the '90s, Rick Rude and Kurt Hennig, and I'm like, what in the hell are you on? It's like you putting Hall of Fame guys as unappreciated or underrated. What are you doing? Or Scott Hall, and it's like, are you? And then I remember it's the internet, and any moron can write for Sportster. So, but yeah, Perry Saturn is one that I'm like, dude had. Honestly, I thought the dude had skills, but when he got what you might call his biggest exposure, it felt like they made him into a joke.
In WCW.
In WWF.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
They didn't do anything with him, really, did they?
Well, I remember in WCW, like that he was part of the flock, and then there was this weird period where they had him like wearing a dress.
I think the dress.
Well, he was doing a Marilyn Manson gimmick,
Yeah.
he wanted to do a Marilyn Manson gimmick for that.
Yeah, that was totally his idea.
Okay, here you want Saturn made into a joke, Moppy.
Oh, Mafia.
Was that a
Yeah.
WWF thing? Ugh.
They paired Terry Runnels with him as a manager, and the idea was that Saturn would respond with just random stuff to when people would say things to him, and was more infatuated with the mop than he was with Terry. And I'm like, wow, that's just Russo genius right there, is what that is.
Well, it would have been after Russo, but
You.
that would have been
Russo-style
that would have been a
genius,
Gurwitz thing, probably.
But yeah, no, I really like, and I kind of like how the Rings of Saturn have kind of gotten new credibility with Pac using it as the brutalizer, because I can remember people dumping on that hold back in the day. Rings of Saturn, that's so lame, and I'm like,
If there's, I mean, it's one of those things that if you actually probably like applied it to a real person, it looked like it would probably hurt like hell, because you could literally just
I think
like dislocate someone's shoulder. Or
I think
at least act like you are.
I think MMA's helped with stuff like that though, because now people realize like, oh, a Kimura kind of looks lame, but it's actually like terrible.
Oh yeah, it's something that can look really simple, like not flashy, but if you don't tap, like a guy can easily like break your arm.
Yeah.
Like this, just or horrible ligament damage.
Or
So,
when Kurt Angle was doing. That's an interesting one to talk to you about Al Snow, because they were super against them doing that like shoot fighting with Angle, because you couldn't control it. And he's like, well, it's like the Daniel, I don't know how you pronounce his last name. pewter thing
Pewter.
is what happens when you don't have
Pewter, yeah.
complete control over everything. Because they were like, look, Angle's better than them, but these are young, healthy men. Like, something wrong could happen. And then, if you haven't seen it, so they're doing like this quick amateur wrestling thing, and Pewter gets him in a Kimura because Angle's not like a shoot fighter, so he kind of just gives the arm up, and then the referee smartly saves his ass and does like a 1 count.
He does a 3 count in order to get Pewter out of it.
Yeah.
In order to save Angle from it. But
he was in real trouble though. Like,
yeah, no, that Kimura was on. A key lock doesn't look like much of anything, but a key lock will jack you up. There was one that I stumbled across
even like
going
the
through.
heel hook Shamrock did at UFC 1 looks like nothing.
Oh God, I knew what that was when he put it on, and I was immediately just like, I found it in Fire Pro. It was a leg scissor arm lock where you fold the guy's arm, you wrap the leg around it, and you just thread your arm through their elbow and lean back with it. And it's just like, oh sweet God, that elbow's coming apart is what that's gonna,
Yeah.
But thanks to MMA for making submissions more acceptable in general. So those are the guys I had on my list.
I want to add a guy from that era. He gets well regarded, but I don't think people realize like quite how good he was because of how Rudo's handle matches. But Psychosis, when we've done anything with him, is just a workhorse.
So good.
I actually would rank Psychosis a lot better than the guys like Juventud Guerrera that a lot of guys probably like a little more. But I think Psychosis was a much more rounded worker.
Yeah, I think
better worker.
But like, I think people don't realize it because Rudos are bullies, so they try not to do super flashy stuff. But he just like, when we did all those Mysterio ones, like Mysterio is amazing in those, but Psychosis is just like the glue holding it all together. And he's just such a base, and he knows how to like, he knows like all the things to do. He knows how to keep up with Ray just enough and how to bully him. And it's just like, those matches are just so good. And Psychosis is just so excellent in all of those.
The phrase I liked to use that after watching those and thinking about it, the phrase I like to use for Psychosis is the stage on which Ray performs in those matches. You could not have Ray doing it without having the stage to be on.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would say Psychosis is top 5 luchadors from the Nitro era. I would probably put Juventud above him, but that top 5, it's Ray, and then it's a real tight grouping of the other 4.
It'd be like Ray.
So it's almost like mix and match.
It'd be like Ray, Hoovy, Psychosis. Not for his WCW work, but LA Park is obviously up there. The Villanos are good. I mean, most of them are good in their own way, but it depends on how they performed in WCW at the time.
Yeah. The Nitro luchadors, obviously top 5. I'd have to ponder on the other 2 spots, but
yeah. I'm trying to think. There were a couple other names I think I mentioned. I can't think of them off the top of my head. Is there
other luchadors?
No, just guys. Do you have anyone, Matt?
I have 2 that one's kind of like I feel should get recognition. This is from that same era. One should get recognition, kind of for what he wound up doing.
Okay.
And 2, the second one is more like a personal one because I've always kind of liked him, and this bleeds into like the aughts, so it's not just 90s. But first one, I actually feel like late 90s at WCW. I'm gonna choose Brian Clark, aka Wrath.
Oh,
and I will say this.
Yeah,
I'll say this though. This is why I'm saying this, because when Brian Clark debuted as like the Night Stalker, terrible. When he was Adam Bomb in the WWF, still terrible. I actually a little shocked, and I've mentioned this before to you guys. Like, I'm a little shocked that the WWF didn't do more with him, because he was a really good size. Like, he would have thought like Vince would have pushed him.
Great look.
He's terrible. Yeah, great look. So he was terrible. So maybe like they just didn't care. But when he joined WCW in late 90s, like, it's like, oh, okay, like Adam Bomb, whatever. But he really made the Wrath gimmick work. And they booked him smartly where he's a big dude just doing big dude stuff and demolishing folks. And there was a period, and unfortunately, like I think like that there was that match with Kevin Nash where he just like destroyed him essentially, like he never got us over. But there was a period where Wrath got massively over. That people were like, "Oh my God, Wrath!" And they really could have done something with Wrath, but maybe Kevin Nash decided like he was Adam Bomb. Maybe Kevin Nash got jealous or nervous that his spot was gonna be taken,
being threatened. Yeah. So the thing about I now remember that run. Yep, another Adam Bomb. The thing I remember, that run started.
A lot of Wrath. Yeah.
That run started after he quit being part of the Glacier storyline. He was still Wrath, but he was wearing the same like singlet he did as Adam Bomb, but he started using that pump handle power slam as his finish.
Yes.
People started getting behind it, and he did that so well.
And they stole the riff from Running with the Devil for like the start of his music too.
Yeah. And then he did have that streak, and he had kind of a mini feud with Ming, where he had to like melt down Ming 3 times in order to put him down. And then Kevin Nash killed him on the way to killing Goldberg, because Kevin Nash was like, "I'm going to be the streak killer," and it's like, Kevin, you know what? After a certain era in WCW, were you really a positive?
Well, I think you could have, like, Goldberg fell prey to that twice because you could have gotten something out of him versus Wrath. It wouldn't have been good, but I think they would have had some interest. But then,
when he could probably draw a good house.
I think it would have been pretty good. I mean, it wouldn't have been huge, but it would have been good.
In WWE in 2002, they could have done some business with him versus Kane as a pay-per-view main, but then they killed Kane because Kane got real hot off of Unmasking.
Oh yeah.
But then they absolutely murdered him with Shane McMahon. And then,
AD Vic.
Well, and you're forgetting he also remember he shocked Shane's balls with the car battery.
I remember at that time
laughing hysterically.
Actually, my laughing hysteric.
Oh, it's him setting JR on fire.
Yes, they did that, and they tried to make it like a big dramatic thing. And I watched that live, and I remember watching it, and I literally just I burst out laughing because of the pure absurdity of it. I'm like, oh my God, this is hilarious. Like, I just laughed that he said JR on fire.
Someone on like TSM back in the day had like a gif of like him doing it or something. I just laughed and laughed and laughed.
Because it was him lighting flash paper and then throwing it on a face down JR. And in my head, I remember, and I don't remember where it came from. It's like, this is how you light a fart, JR. And just threw the paper at him.
Oh, remember that they did, like, but remember when he unmasked, they had that terrible, like, crap all over his face that they realized, like, after that, they were like, oh, we can't do that again.
Yeah.
But to finish my thought on Wrath, even after, like, he stopped being Wrath, he was Brian Clark. People forget this tag team, but, like, he and Brian Clark got really over as Chronic. And
Brian Adams and Brian Clark
they got really over attacked. It's to the point where when WCW got bought by WWE, remember, like, they were kind of part of the invasion. They had like a one pay-per-view. Like,
they came in, Taker wanted them.
They feuded with
Taker wanted them, and it was just a terrible match.
He was like legit friends with like Brian Clark, but it was a terrible match, and like they beat Chronic, and like that was the end of it.
Yeah, because Chronic hadn't wrestled since the end of WCW. And they get brought in for this without any time to like shake off the ring rust, and the match sucks.
Well, they went long too, didn't they want them to go long too? Like, didn't they go like 20 minutes or something like ridiculous like that?
I don't know.
I don't remember. I just remember that it's.
I don't remember that you're talking about like 20 plus years ago. But if they did, like, that's a bad idea. Do like 5-minute match, 10-minute match at most.
I mean,
even if you did that as a.
Even if they weren't rusty, it wouldn't go long. Because remember, Taker was real. Yeah. Taker was fat in that era and not so great.
Taker was dealing with a lot of injuries at that point.
Remember, that's the era where he went to give the last ride to Test and had like that was like one of the scariest things I've ever seen on TV. Where like they almost lost it and like Did Taker did he almost like lose? Did they, like, I think. Tell me if I'm wrong. So he got him up, and then Taker started going backwards, didn't he? Because like the weight
I think
was off.
that's right.
And then he got
they
into
hit the ropes and got it back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but that's one of the scariest things I've ever seen on TV. Because I'm like, oh my gosh, he's going to drop him over the top rope, and
yeah. But I agree with you. That's an awesome choice, Matt.
Wrath was not like a personal favorite. Brian Clark's not a personal favorite because overall I'm not a fan, but I do think that like late 90s Brian Clark somehow like pulled it together.
Yeah, and he was really kind
a
of
point where he probably should have been booked better than he was. So.
And they'd really kind of botched him the first year too.
Yeah.
Oh, I have a good one because we watched him wrestle Wrath, the Barbarian. Who?
Oh yeah, Barbarian.
Because
Barbarian was better than he gets credit for. He wasn't a guy you're gonna push as like your main guy, but he was a better worker than I feel you probably like realize. And I say that because like
we've seen him in good stuff.
Historically, we've been like Barbarian, like
well, I mean, we've seen
him have good matches with people.
The good match with the Boss Man, and then that like 45-minute Survivor Series. I will die on my grave that he was the MVP of that match. Because remember,
watch that.
It was like the weird, like he was a face, remember, and like he was just doing these like intense like babyface comebacks and just was really carrying that match. And then the Wrath match we saw was better than it had any right to be, and that sticks out to me because remember. We talked about on the show because he went to throw Wrath into the ring steps and Wrath slipped and fell. And it was a blown spot, which, we just saw like just everyone panicked at a pay-per-view. But, so it's a blown spot and Barbarian just kind of picks him up, rams him into the ring apron and tosses him into the ring. You don't even really notice it. Barbarian's like, oh, okay. Instead of, instead of like, them freaking out because Damian Priest forgot to kick out.
That is 100% on him. Like, that should not have... First of all, that shouldn't have been the spot, because why would somebody's music stop a count? But then second, he should have kicked out. That's straight up on him.
I don't know why... They could have worked. They could have done that without it being so convoluted because you could have just given the belt to Seth Rollins, Drew cashes in, it somehow becomes a 3-way and Damian Priest wins it back after Punk interferes and costs Drew the title. Like, I would have been a convoluted way to fix it, but like the way they handled it was the wrong way to do it. And then I saw some article with like, oh, they don't blame the referee for that. I'm like, it's not the referee's fault. Like everyone
knows. The ref did exactly what he was supposed to do.
Yeah, because everything I've ever seen from any worker is kicking out is your responsibility, and the ref is going to count no matter what. Because
the ref needs to just straight up count you, and then if you don't kick out, that's your damn fault. Like that is basic, but it's also not what happened. Which is why I put all that on Priest.
Did he? And I don't think he got concussed, did he?
I don't know. I know there was discussion, like, is that what happened?
He got his bell wrong or something.
I mean, and maybe it did, but even if that's the case, like, Seth knew full well.
So,
if he's not doing something, then for God's sakes, like, 1, 2, and here it comes, and like push his legs or something.
So you've done the work thing. Is it possible? Like he just spaced out for a second, and he was a count behind where it was like, okay, the second, like the 2 he thought was 1, and then it was
Oh yeah, that's entirely possible. Yeah, you're right. If he got his bell rung, all right. Big caveat on this: if he got his bell rung on that. And he's laying there, and he's just trying to get himself back together, and he's like, holy crap, what number is he counting on right now? And that just happens? Okay, I get it. Like, honest to God, I do. I have not heard anybody in the know say that's what happened. But if it is, then I get it. And if that's the case, then I would have thought that Seth could have, 1, 2, he ain't moving. Seth should have done something. Just like throw his legs or something. But
isn't it better though? Like, I'm just asking. I mean, I know there's the whole near fall, but like, let's say you get your bell slightly wrong and you still know, like, okay, I'm not supposed to lose here. Shouldn't you just automatically like do the movement to kick out?
Just do something is what I would say. Yeah, because it's
just be like, oh shit, like I don't know what the count is. Like, okay, like get my shoulder up.
I'm laying here on the mat. There's a count going. I'm not supposed to lose, and I'm just going to kind of like try and roll over on it or something. Even if it's not like 2.9, just roll.
Just get the
just go with it.
Just keep the match going.
Just get up off your get a shoulder up, and keep things going.
It was real weird. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah. I don't know what happened.
Maybe I could see on Seth's part though being in denial and like going deer in the heads, like, oh, maybe he's just going quick, like, oh shit, like.
Yeah. Okay. You know what? You're right. That could have Seth having faith in him to do that, and then it just goes by so quickly. Yeah, that's yes. But
because I think like I think if I was in Seth's position, like, okay, the hand's coming down, he's going to kick out. Like, well, he's probably going to kick out real slow. And you don't want to be like, well, I don't want to let up and then screw up. Like, like I don't want to blow the spot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well.
And he was also like, he was far away from Damien's head too, I think. So I think that, well, like he
was in kind of like a sit-out powerbomb position. So there's not a good way for them to talk to each other.
Yeah, or even for him to like notice too, I think, because you're a little.
Well, yeah, because there's not a good way to tell. So I don't know, man. That's tough. It is.
I just saw an article like they don't blame the referee because they blame the referee sometimes. Like, you should never blame the referee.
No, you didn't. That referee did exactly what the referee was supposed to do. Do not hate on that ref.
Yeah.
Not even for a minute.
It's worse though. It's worse though, like when they hesitate because they know it's messed up. Like, that's worse than just.
I told you the story about the one ref we had who
asked you if he should keep counting.
Yeah, he asked someone in the ring, "Do you want me to count 3?" And it's like, oh my god, did that? Oh, that happened. Like, we're in the back, and that happens, and the entire locker room goes, like, almost in unison.
Wow.
Yeah, we're just like, no. Yeah. But
I appreciate.
I'm not gonna over the top it.
Speaking of good refs, though, I appreciate when I think it was the one where Thunder Rosa beat Britt for the title, where the only place for Audrey to do the count was in the tacks, and she dove into those tacks to do.
She just did it anyway.
Yeah,
man. Anybody who bags on Aubrey Edwards as a ref is being that's bad faith, because Aubrey is awesome.
Also, I liked the way I think we've talked about the clip before, but it's back in the indie days where it almost started a riot when Ray Phoenix kicked her in the head and she just dead weight drops, and you could just hear the crowd go like super ugly.
Oh, they were gonna kill him.
Yeah,
they were gonna kill him. And I've got to be honest with you, if I had ever done something like that got that kind of heat, I would have smiled from ear to ear. I would have been like, oh, this is what you live for right here.
Yeah. Did you have another one, Matt?
Yeah, the one there's like a personal one.
Mm-hmm.
And what I said, like, it kind of goes like to the early odds, because I actually feel like he was actually a pretty decent worker, but in like the mid to late 90s, he got over to the point where he was in a three-way for the world title match at the first ECW pay-per-view, but Stevie Richards. Stevie Richards is the guy that I've always personally kind of liked. Real name Michael Manna, who has become like a workout like weight loss guy, and it was actually like a strength coach for like a almost for
He
like
was also
some
a
sort of
DDPY
an NFL.
coach too.
And he
Okay, he became like a strength coach for I feel like almost like an NFL guy, but
he did tech reviews for a long time. I know I bought a Switch
he
because
did.
he did a review of that, and
He did tech reviews.
he does some.
He's got a YouTube channel that's really
Yeah,
good too.
he does he does like video breakdowns of like why moves didn't work or like what happened there and stuff like that.
Yeah.
He
But
just kind of recently changed that up, so it's not just like Stevie Richards breaks down wrestling moves, and I think part of that was
He's drama farming a little bit now too.
well, he was also catching some flack for copyright footage.
Which whatever.
Yeah. It's
but
fair use, but
yeah, but the problem is like if you do that on YouTube, it wouldn't affect him, but like so the insidious thing about YouTube, so like let's say you get copyright struck by someone that like might be trying to hurt you. So they took that video away, but to dispute it, you would have to like let's say a stalker did that to you. To dispute it, you have to dox yourself to. You have to give your information to that stalker to properly dispute it via YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah, there's YouTube is weighted towards the person who's issuing the accusation.
Yeah.
And
they
don't give you much in the way of.
They're a little better now.
Well, it's pretty low down bar.
The thing that I don't like about it, the way that companies like that handle, is you can go in and you can take their monetization versus striking it. Like if someone does it, you can just be like, "Oh, this is my shit. Like I want the money from it, or I want half the money from it." Like you can do that on YouTube.
Yeah, but no, they issue a strike, which hangs on your channel. I mean, hell, and nobody is immune to it. I mean, Markiplier got a strike for something, and that was completely fair use, and he's one of the biggest names on that platform.
And the problem is, like, companies get blamed, but like sometimes, like WWE doesn't even strike you. Some of the times, it's like some idiot, like White Knight, being like, "Oh my god, like this can't exist."
They do that, or there's copyright bots that'll just run through and find it and do it automated. And YouTube support is automated too.
My favorite one was, I think Guinness World Records struck a guy for his Mario speedrun saying it was copyright infringement.
Nintendo would have struck him, I think.
No, Guinness tried to strike him.
Guinness did it?
Yeah, Guinness Book of World Records struck him for a Mario speedrun. It was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. I don't think Nintendo strikes a lot on YouTube. They'll kill you for mods and stuff, and and pirating. But like I think like footage on YouTube, I think they don't, because usually that's Let's Plays, and those don't get really bothered much anymore because companies have caught on that those are just good for business to exist.
Yeah, it's free marketing.
Yeah.
Let's Plays are basically just free marketing for you, but.
Yeah, those usually don't get you, and those are easier to. I mean, you just put your picture playing it. That usually is good enough.
Yeah.
Now, Twitch, on the other hand, Twitch, you can just play. You can just play TV shows on there, and no one will do shit to you there.
Now, I do want to go back to Matt's pick with Stevie Richards. I really do appreciate that. As we've said before, Stevie acted the buffoon in the ring, and you have to be really good to be able to do a good job being a buffoon and no one gets hurt. But remember, Stevie is also the guy that spearheaded one of the least popular stables of all time and made it work. Yes.
Yeah.
And it worked. Like, it worked so well.
I liked... He got popular in ECW doing the whole big Stevie Cool thing, but it kind of like transcended him just doing like an NWO parody to the point where
Mhm.
people like respected like his actual work. And I felt he was a decent worker.
Nash and
Mhm.
And
Hall enjoyed the parody because he said
yeah,
he did a talk about that, and he said they were screwing with him, and Nash was like, "Oh no, we thought it was funny." And then he's like, did you get a cut of those T-shirt sales?" And he's like, "No," and he's like, "Okay, now I have a problem with you."
um,
You know, Heyman wasn't giving them a damn thing for
oh
those.
no,
No.
uh,
No.
but
That's
I liked
cocaine
him
that needs to be
WCW.
stored, my friends.
Yeah. Then he went to WCW and was just like Raven Slack again. But I've always felt he was entertaining. But then when he actually wound up signing with the WWE, the Right to Censor was like more entertaining than it needed to be. And the fact that he was the head of that and was actually a good enough promo and charismatic enough to kind of like make that work was impressive to me. And I generally liked the work he did with Victoria, where like the two of them were just like crazy, like like they're crazy, like they were in love, but they're also like just
Crazy
psychopaths.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and him doing Stevie Night Heat when they did WWE Heat before like WWE pay-per-views.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always felt he was like actually a much more a more decent worker than he got credit for. Not that he's like obviously like
He
doesn't have
never
Ric Flair.
he never got a chance to really like show it, I would say.
Yeah, but I felt decent enough worker that like if he came along like now, he probably would be able to get a contract at WWE or AEW because
Yeah.
he's good enough worker. Is he world class? Was he world class? Like I don't think he was like world class, but he was like entertaining enough and he was a
He
good enough
was
promo. Like he had charisma. Like I felt Stevie's always been like a guy that personally I felt I've enjoyed. He's like a guy that I think like not that he should have been like you gotta give like even like a mid card title to necessarily, but
Mm-hmm.
entertaining enough that he's a guy that I've always kind of enjoyed back in his era. Like, yeah.
he falls
So
into that category we were talking about 2 weeks ago of like how everyone thinks people should be like, oh, if they're not a world champion, they're getting wasted, like that
oh
idea.
yeah.
And Stevie's a great example. Well, and Coco's a good example of it too. Of position players that really excel at their work that don't like might not necessarily be more, but like being that like rock solid position player kept them getting paychecks for a long time.
And
Yeah.
there's levels to that because they're yeah, at the very high end of that, you have a guy like Arn Anderson, who is an absolute legend, but and won some like secondary titles, like the TV title. And maybe Arn Anderson was a guy that it's like on a Clash of the Champions or like a TV main event, WCW Saturday Night. You could have had him like challenge for the world title. But was he ever going to win it? No.
No.
But he would win like a secondary title, and he would consistently win like the tag titles, and it
Yeah.
was part of one of, if not arguably, the greatest wrestling stable of all time, the Four Horsemen. He's like the high end, where it's like that's a guy that's utility player, like was never going to rise above a certain level, but was part of a bigger deal, always part of like a big thing, and is a guy that could anyone put him with anyone, make his opponent look great. He's at the high level, but there's tons of guys out there that's like that. That it's like they're never going to be like the guy. Maybe a mid card title or a tag title run was like that's going to be the pinnacle
Or
Mm-hmm.
of
maybe
their career
in like
in terms of like a championship level. But
even in like a like emergency, maybe like a real like short transitional change. But that's always the I'll tell you one who I think is a perfect example of that people I think don't understand that like I think he's a modern example, but Malachi Black I think falls into that like excellent position player. Um Really, especially in AEW, he has a good like they have a good like spot in the card. They are an upper mid card heel threat. And like Malachi Black, you might like put like a very brief world title reign on to like transition, but like I don't see him at that level. But he's a great like number 3 heel on your roster.
Arn Anderson
Yeah.
refers to people in that role as carpenters because they build the frame that everything else goes on, and you can't have a show without carpenters on it.
Yeah.
Not
And
everybody's going to be the superstar. You need guys who are going to build out the rest of the show.
that's the thing that people don't realize. Like there are some people who, and again, I would hold Arn Anderson as almost like he's the upper echelon. Like he's at the highest tier of that because he was in terms of like where would you rank Arn Anderson in terms of as like a singles guy, like mid tier at least, not in terms of like his actual work, but in terms of like how high was that guy going to go? Like he was never probably going to be like maybe during the height of like the Four Horsemen of periods, you could argue he maybe would have been like the upper mid card heel,
I would
but
say
he would
I would
never
say
going to be like
I would say so. Where I would place him is typically high end mid carder to bouts of like a low level upper mid carder.
yeah.
Like he would be
He,
because people don't understand. I think like there are tiers within like mid like all of the cards. So like I think he usually was like at the very height of like a mid carder. Like if you put him in there with most mid carders, he's probably gonna win. And then he had bouts of being a lower upper mid carder. But like if you put him in there with a main eventer or even like most upper mid carders, he's probably gonna eat a loss or get DQ'd.
he's gonna eat the pin, but he's gonna make the guy look great
Yeah.
and would have success in other ways, like perpetual tag team champion, like textbook, like a tag team worker,
Yeah.
like fantastic guy. He's like again upper echelon. There's tons of guys in wrestling business that at all levels, in the WWE and in the AEW, that are there who are probably going to eat more pins than they get wins, and that's okay because that's not their role. Their role, they're not supposed to be world champion. They're supposed to go in there and be at least entertaining enough of personality that you like connect with them, like you find them interesting to see. But they also are there to make the other guy look good. Maybe you can guys give me examples if you think like in WWE or AEWs like that. Like someone like AEW, like let's say like the Butcher. The Butcher is a guy who like can go out. He's big, has a unique look, can go out there and like throw guys around. But at the end of the day, it's gonna like eat a loss. Like I actually watched. I think it was a Rampage match from like the last like 5-6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Butcher wrestled Penta, bigger dude than Penta.
Mm-hmm.
Who's higher card, Butcher or Penta? Penta.
Yeah.
And Penta won.
Yeah.
But it was a Butcher like doing some power moves, making him look like a monster, and then Penta like wins. And it's like that's a perfect example of a relatively short match that he looked good because he's like big dude throwing around a smaller guy, but Penta, who's the more of the star in AEW, ultimately wins the match, comes out looking better, and it has ultimately made everyone look good. Butcher still looks good even in the loss because he's a big dude. He threw this smaller guy around, made himself look like a monster. But the smaller guy, better worker, more talented, found a way to beat his bigger opponent. Penta looks great.
AEW has a lot of position players. I think that like WWE does too. Like who would be a good example of WWE? Like Ray's a good position player now. Like the Street Profits. AJ's kind of like kind of creeping into that like position player now.
Who is it that is Walter / Gunther's
Ludwig Kaiser and
Kaiser.
I forget the other guy.
I think I'm thinking of Kaiser.
I think the problem WWE has though is their roster is a little stale. So like guys that should be good position players like Kevin Owens aren't anymore because you've jobbed him to the point that no one cares if he's in a title match. You're just like, I don't care. He's gonna lose. He always loses.
Here's one I've forgotten. Otis. Otis is a great position player. Yeah. He gets over really big. He does a good job with his stuff, but he's not going to win something big.
Yeah,
Which is sad because there actually was a period where you could have probably like used him as like an upper mid card guy. Would he have won the title? Like, I don't think he should
that
have,
Mandy
but
Rose
you could
angle
have
they
probably,
couldn't get over
yeah,
quick enough,
you
and then
you could have probably
Oh, dude, that
believably
angle
put,
was working at the time.
yeah, and
Oh, it was cooking, and then COVID hit, and they killed it. They finished it. They killed it
and
immediately.
she was never over again because they didn't.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
they tried to make
they
her
killed
wrestle.
the angle. They killed the angle, and then they sent her to a different show and made her change her look.
Yeah,
And it's like, wow, you have taken everything in this angle that worked, and you have done your best to butcher it to punish them for being over with an angle.
and then she got fired for showing her boobies on some sort of OnlyFans-esque service because they weren't
Not
getting their...
OnlyFans, but kind of similar or something.
Yeah, I don't actually.
I think it
know.
was OnlyFans.
No, it was something
Was
else.
it?
I don't even think she was showing her boobs. I think she was just in bikinis and stuff. But I could be wrong.
I don't know.
I don't. So I don't recall that there was nudity, but I think that it's like she was like racy photos, and they freaked out. So
Well, you can only show your goods on if the company's getting a cut of it.
yeah,
Company's getting half the proceeds.
Yeah, like because Donovan. I don't even remember. What
hijack.
Dijak, yeah.
Oh yeah, okay. They gave him a dumber name, but he just did like a cameo sale because they weren't taking half his stuff anymore. Because we were kind of talking about this on the side, like what my opinion on it is, because people come down, like they're being ridiculous wanting half, but I think the people that are like, oh, they should just be able to do whatever and WWE doesn't get a cut, I think are also wrong. Because my opinion on it is, so up up down down is a good example. So if Austin Creed is doing that as Austin Creed, which he does, they should get nothing. Now, if he was doing it as Xavier Woods, I think he owes them some amount of it. I don't think half. I think like I think 10 to 15% would be fair. Like I think if you're like Twitch streaming as like WWE, NXT, John Smith, like CAW number 12, like there's a legit argument that you're only getting what you're getting because of your because you're using a WWE trademark. So I think there is a fair amount there. I don't think it's half. Half is ridiculous. But I think the people that act like they don't owe them anything, like if you're using your WWE trademark name to make money on the side, I think you should probably give them like a nominal fee for it. Like, but if you're doing like AJ Styles, like then you can do whatever you want because you built your name on your own. And
Yeah, it's your name. You're just letting them use it.
Yeah.
But I mean, hell, they killed everybody's other revenue streams because they weren't controlling them.
I just thought that was short-sighted though, because like I thought, like especially when Up Up Down Down was really in its heyday, I thought they were benefiting from that because you got like to see people's personalities and like stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Lots of people were going on there, and folks were really enjoying what they saw.
Yeah.
But can't have that.
Because Ethan Page, his YouTube channel suddenly goes on hiatus, and all of his million subscribers are out of luck now. Which
is million subscribers.
Yeah.
Reduce that number by about like 90%, and you have
93. He has like 97,000. Which like that's the thing.
Still ain't nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, like it.
Yeah.
I just think the people making that claim do not understand like the landscape of YouTube, because if you have 1 million subscribers, like you're in like massive, like
you are in rarefied company.
Like you could live on.
The very specific person who is making that claim is full of shit, and
yeah.
If you listen to the rumors, like he actually might personally know Ethan Page, so he's basically being a mouthpiece for
that one. There's that idiot that you were arguing with that was just like going like cuckoo bananas talking about that million thing, and people were like, he has 97,000. Like, oh, it doesn't matter. It's like your reaction to it. It's like they're pointing out facts to you.
I won't even like mention it, but yeah, like on Twitter, there's a personality. He's not even like American. He's from a different country, but he's was going off, and Ethan Page actually won the NXT title, looking like a complete geek doing it, like
Oh
his
yeah, it was
weird
terrible.
finish.
That was a
But
terrible
he
finish.
was cheering. He was like cheering it. So for like half a second, he was like insufferable because he's like the biggest Ethan Page fanboy. Turns out it may be because like Ethan Page actually directly talks to him, so it's like you might be like his personal like propagandist, I guess. But he was insufferable for like half a second, but then everyone started clowning on him because he actually is like in the wrestling community is somewhat of a known personality. But people just immediately started clowning on him.
Well,
And it didn't turn out to be a good night for him. But he
no.
did do some things like claiming like, oh, Ethan has a because his position and which he's been going on for like a month or two is going like way too inside baseball. But basically he's saying like AEW is going to die because they fumbled the bag, they fumbled the ball on Ethan Page, and it's like Ethan Page, like I'm higher, I'm not as high on Ethan Page as you guys are, maybe, or some other people
He's a
are.
good position
I think
player.
Ethan Page is like mid as all hell.
I think
But
he's
people are like, no, he's a good promo. He's like, oh, he's not a bad worker. It's like he's not even the most entertaining half of the tag team he was part of in TNA.
no, but I think he's a good position player. He's like if he was knocking at your door wanting a job, you'd be like, yeah, come on in. But like you're not gonna live or die by having him on your roster. Like he's not a needle
This
mover.
person basically made it seem like AEW fumbled
Yeah.
Steve Austin or The Rock level talent, and it's like, dude, Ethan Page. Like again, you can say he's a good position player, but
it was so dumb.
Look, TNA, AEW.
But it was
like
so
really
dumb.
like two companies completely whiffed on this once in a generation talent that WWE is gonna capitalize on. And all of a sudden, like you're gonna see WrestleMania 2025, like Ethan Page is gonna be like the main star main eventing this. Like, come on.
You know what? To give a little credit,
36-year-old dude like this now it's his time, guys. Like, come on.
It might be that the very structured format of working in WWE fits him better. And if that's the case, great. But the track record is not exactly lining up with the narrative.
I think he's a good talent, but like it's like the role player we were just talking about. Like Ethan Page is a mid-carder. He's a good mid-carder. He is a good person to put on your TV, but like you can let Ethan Page go tomorrow and it won't affect your bottom line because he's just like, and I'm not even dogging him for saying that. Like there are probably single digit people that move the needle.
Oh yeah.
Like think about all the people that AEW has brought in like in the last 2 years. We're talking people like Edge and like the people that like I think they've gotten. Will Ospreay and Mercedes Moné have moved the needle in their segments a bit, like of the new people. Like that's how like generally rare it is.
Yeah.
But I also want to say like the YouTube live really annoys me though because they I guess they don't understand that, but you can look on someone's page and see how many subscribers they have. So it was disproven instantly, but you guys mentioned it, and then I was like, LOL. And when I came back and I had like his page metrics, like I showed you like what he was getting for subscribers, like views, what the estimates of how much his channel was making is. Like it was such a stupid lie. Like you can
yeah, that Sunday night, like people were clowning on him because he was making like just nonsense. This individual was making like nonsense claims. He one of the things he said, which people like immediately like clowned on him for, and with good reason. He's like, Ethan Page is going to have an action figure before Swerve Strickland is going to. Swerve obviously being the AEW champion, and it's like people immediately like started throwing up pictures. It's like, Swerve Strickland actually has a toy out right now for me, and his response to that was like, well, it's not a current toy with him with the championship. And it's like, really?
Does
Really?
he realize that, like,
One, you're an idiot. There's a toy already out. Two, do you not like
it
friend of
takes
the show?
time?
Matt, I
Friend
want to
of the
show you something.
show.
You see this? These are
Yeah.
goalposts. Look what I'm
Are they
doing.
moving?
Yeah.
But like we know because we know someone in the action figure industry. Like it takes time.
Friend of the show, Christy
Yeah.
Petrillo.
It takes
time.
Yeah, because
Look, WWE is very, very tied in to Mattel, who does their toys, and so because of that relationship and the technology they had, like to like face scan stuff, the WWE actually can produce figures quicker than just about anyone else. That said, it's still like months. Like if I like Shad, you were a worker. If you sign with the WWE tonight, like you sign that contract, boom, tomorrow they scan you in. Like it's still gonna be like months.
yeah, because you have.
But it will be. It's July. It'll be longer probably than the holiday season before the Shad action figure pops up in actual stores.
Because they
so
come
don't
out,
be like, oh, Ethan Page is going to have like a figure before Swerve. It's like, one, again, Swerve's already out. Two, really, like you need Swerve in like the different outfit with the title belt to be like officially like, oh, an Ethan Page figure. An Ethan Page figure is not going to happen until 2025.
Well, and
because even like this, the company that streamlines things that'll happen sooner than everything else, it's not happening.
Yeah, because you have to figure it into a line of figures because. I don't know how many they come out with, but most only come out with like 6 or 8 figures at a time. So, but when you do that, so, okay, let's say you're coming out with a wave of 8 action figures for WWE. Okay, so Roman or Cody probably needs a figure in that line because collectors and or kids are going to want a fresh main eventer. You're probably going to have an Uso in there. Like, you have to have important people in there. So that's probably 5 figures. So that's 3 left for lesser ones. And Ethan Page is an NXT guy, so you have to like sneak him in there somewhere. But you know, they probably have the next like 6 or 7 line, like the next like year figured out already. I mean, how long did it take him to get a Punk figure out? What, like 4 or 5 months?
So I actually was just looking that up, and so Punk came back Survivor Series 2023. And Mattel Creations, again, Mattel does.
Oh, that was that awful beer gut Punk. That was the first one.
They put out a figure of him, and it's literally just him in a white T-shirt and jeans, because that was the attire he showed up in November 2020. So it's like they didn't even do like a
real one,
like fancy attire. The only thing that's special is like they got the face scan and like the tattoos.
Mm-hmm.
So they did that on their webpage, like a special, like elite collection. Like
this is for the hardcore of the hardcore, by the way.
Yeah, and that it's looking at it's sold out.
Yeah, because they probably did what, like 2,000 of them, 3,000
maybe. But that I want to say probably went up like last month or so. Like let's even say like May. Again, he came back November 2023.
Oh wow, that's longer than I thought.
Like, it's not out. It's not out. It's like these are the pre-orders made to order. So these are like the pre-orders. It hasn't even shipped yet. It's not like I can hold it up. Oh, I have it in my hand. So like the pre-orders. So it's July. So now we're like 8 months and 7 months.
8 months for CM Punk. 8 months for CM Punk.
Yeah.
Like the guy,
and that's stuff that you already have probably some existing assets for,
and the guy that you would be like scrambling to get that out because there is money to be made.
Yeah, and this figure sold out. Fairness to Punk. I don't like the guy, but like fairness to him. Like,
well, but the comparison
first WWE figure in like years, like
but the comparison too is that would be a high demand figure. So like. That would go to the top of the pile, and it's taken 8 months. And Ethan Page is not going to go to the top of the pile.
Right.
If he ever gets
You're going to see Ethan Page, like, 10 months from now in WWE Elite Wave, like, whatever. like first time in line, Ethan Page, and it's like,
How long does it take? Do they do a lot of the NXT people as figures, or do they kind of just like?
it depends. Like, this is like into like wrestling toy collection, but for WWE, they do NXT people, but it's
Spotty.
it's not spotty, but it's also like for every like I'd actually have to like see how many waves they put out in a year. Let's say they do every other month, every 3 months, 2 to 3 months. They put out like a like the Elite Collection wave. Excuse me. Even then, it's probably like you get maybe a couple like NXT people or developmental people, and they still do a lot of like repeats where it's like we're on like our in like 2 years we're on like second or third like Dominic Mysterio, Damian Priest figure.
Mm-hmm.
Like every like other wave they put out like a Sammy figure or Roman Reigns figure. It's
Yeah,
like it's
'cause-
back in the day. Back in the day, like every other wave you get like a John Cena figure.
Yeah,
And
because
it's like, yeah, you play the hits.
Well,
Like you
and-
do.
and it's like also, I mean, I don't think a lot of kids buy them, but like if you're putting toys out like for kids, like they need to have like the main characters. Like a kid wanting a WWE figure is gonna want like John Cena or Cody, so you need to have like
Oh, and in the 2+ years since Cody has signed with WWE, they put out like probably a dozen
yeah,
Cody figures.
because
It's been like a glut of Cody figures.
that's my point about Ethan Page taking a while though, because you need to have the hits in there because like a wave with like a bunch of mid carders isn't going to do as well. Like you need the top guys to anchor the.
Yeah, you got to mix it up. You got to have your draws in there.
Yeah.
Look, they probably consider Ethan Page possibly a bigger star, especially since they put the title on him, and he's coming from AEW, so they might want to make a point of putting a figure out of him or what have you. But like Tony D'Angelo in NXT, who has been with NXT for like a while, like a couple of years.
He's been there for like 2 years, hasn't he?
Yeah, like he just now has like a figure that's out or about to be released. So he's just come out, and maybe they rush Ethan Page, but again, all this like discussion, but it's like that's the whole point, like being like, oh, WWE has a leg up on AEW with Ethan Page, and it's like they don't. Like
It's just the
they already have a
reality.
Swerve stricken. They already have a Swerve figure out. They actually have an Ethan Page. AEW has an Ethan Page figure dropping anytime now. So it's like AEW is more on the ball than they, but this individual is.
Yeah, and it's not
Since
even
Ethan Page left AEW, he's presented like, oh, AEW. He's become more of like a WWE fanboy, where it's like, oh,
it's not even,
WWE.
and that the action figure thing is not even an Ethan Page thing. That's like a reality of a retail product and the production like schedule for that. Like it's just
they released Bronson Reed and then put out his figure.
Yeah.
And at the time that they released his figure that was out there, they hired him back.
Well, no, I think,
and now they put out like a second version of his
I think
figure. So-
AEW put a CM Punk figure out after they fired him.
Oh, yeah.
It was already in production, and they're
Yeah.
like, well, we've already done it.
And I think like
Yeah.
it just takes a while. Like it is not a quick process. Like it just
I mean, just
The company that does
thinking through the whole thing, what does it do? You got to do the scans. You got to make sure the scans are proper, that there's not like glitches in them somewhere. There's not a then after you got the scans made, you have to get the molds made. You have to test the molds to make sure that what you put into it comes out properly. And then after you do all of that, that's just like getting the head part down. You've got to decide what the other parts are going to be, what kind of coloration is going to be, sourcing the pigments for the paints you're wanting to use to make sure they're exactly what you want and all that sort of stuff. It is not a fast process. It's never going to be a fast process. It can't be a fast process.
Yeah, so I would say, like, when you're getting wrestling figures, they're like a year behind what's going on in the actual promotion.
Yeah, that sounds.
Okay.
Yeah, that all lines
well,
up.
I would say that is it for tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you as always for being here, guys. I think next week we're gonna do some Portland stuff that we had talked about. It's either gonna be Portland or more Savage in Memphis. Like, those are probably the next two we got coming up. Like I said, we've never really done anything from Portland, and we were just talking like, oh, we need to dive into that. So that'll be next week. So thank you everyone for joining us as always. This is the 4Corners pod. We've been in 3 corners. You can ignore Craig there, and you're in the 4th. So thank you for watching as always, and we will see you next time.